right, I'm back. Sorry for the break. First half of this year has a pretty crazy travel schedule, so it's been tough for me to keep up on these. But today we've got one from Glenn who says, can you compare the benefits, differences, and uses for the no brush muscle snatch and the brush muscle snatch? This is one of those exercises in particular, and there's a lot of them in weightlifting. Where the terminology is unclear, everybody disagrees on what a certain thing is, and then if you can agree on a name, everyone disagrees on how it's supposed to be done. It's a huge mess. So let me first say that to me, a muscle snatch has contact, right? It contacts the body exactly like a snatch does at the hips. You would then need to specify if you want it done with no contact, or with no hook grip, or with no straps, or whatever the variation you're looking for is. A muscle snatch without contact, I call a snatch long pull. Although if you say do a muscle snatch with no contact, I know exactly what you mean, of course, because I'm not a complete idiot. So the differences, obviously, are the contact or lack thereof, and what that means is that with no contact, you're going to be a bit more dependent on the upper body to move the bar, simply because you're not able to accelerate the bar as much. So exactly like if you were doing a regular snatch and you didn't allow that bar to touch your body, you can't get the same kind of acceleration and therefore the kind of speed and elevation you would get if you contacted properly. You can't extend the body as forcefully. It also means that the bar is going to be in front of you. Of course, that's how it doesn't contact. And that means mechanically you're going to be in a worse position. It's going to be harder. You're going to be basically being pulled forward the whole time. And you're not actually going to be able to open the body completely. In other words, a complete finish in a snatch or a clean has the legs extended about vertically, and then the hips slightly hyperextended to bring the shoulders behind the hips, right? You can't get in that position if you're trying to not contact the body with the bar, because your shoulders being behind the bar means the bar is going to move in against the body, right? So you can't actually extend the same way. So in theory, the idea behind a no contact or a no brush muscle snatch is to get more work for the upper body and make it more of an upper body strength exercise. I'm not entirely convinced that it's that important, honestly, because you cannot remove the upper body strength component from a muscle snatch, whether or not there's contact, right? That's kind of the whole point of a muscle snatch. Because you're not able to launch that bar up and then move down under it, you're relying on upper body strength to preserve the whatever speed and momentum you've generated early on in a lift with the legs and hips to complete that turnover and get the bar overhead without your body moving down under it, to kind of get avoid the upper body having to do as much work. So whether or not you're contacting, it's a very upper body dependent exercise. That's the limiting factor. No one misses a muscle snatch because their legs aren't strong enough, right? So what you're gaining, the reason I prefer doing muscle snatches with contact is, number one, we're doing this exercise to improve the snatch, right? It's not a standalone thing. We don't compete in the muscle snatch. We don't have to be good at it for its own sake. We have to do it in a way that is going to confer as much benefit to the actual snatch as possible. And so in my mind, we want to mimic, in this case at least, as much of the snatch motion as possible to maximize the benefit. So if we can extend the body in essentially the exact same way, so the legs are driving vertically, the hips are hyperextending, the bar is coming into contact at the hip and then staying as close as possible, that's going to translate what we're getting from the muscle snatch into the snatch as much as possible. And like I said, no matter whether or not you contact, this is still very much an upper body dependent exercise. You still have to be strong. You still have to have that aggression and that timing to be able to complete the turnover without flipping your elbows down and forward, like you've heard me rail against over and over and over again and hurt people's feelings over. And what you're going to gain, though, is that you don't get from no contact is really dialing in the timing and learning how to maintain that bar body proximity after contact at the hip, which you're going to have to do with a snatch, right? It's very easy when you're learning, especially, but even for more advanced lifters, to let that bar contact the hip and then ricochet off forward away from the body, which ruins your whole life, right? So a muscle snatch is a great opportunity, a great exercise to practice that full contact, and then not just driving the legs and extending the body properly so that you don't get excessive forward momentum on that bar, but learning how to time the motion of the upper body, the pull of the arms, and the actual mechanics of that in order to maintain that proximity and really actively keep the bar against the body all the way up as you're turning it over, right? So it's learning how to avoid moving the bar away and then having to do damage control and try to pull it back. It's too late. You know, you've already done damage that can't be undone, so you're trying to just mitigate it. We want to avoid it in the first place. So again, in my mind, doing a muscle snatch with contact is what makes sense 99% of the time. And there will be that 1% of the time when maybe you say, oh, for whatever reason, doing it with no contact is going to make sense. And that's a very individual thing. It absolutely would not be my default or my go-to variation of the muscle snatch. Something else you can do is really practice these things from the power position. So starting with your trunk vertical, bar in contact with the hips and bending the knees only. So you're bending straight down, holding that position, checking your balance, making sure you're tight, and then initiating by driving straight up with the legs and then following through with that hip hyperextension, right? And that really does wonders for teaching people how to feel that proper finish and feed right into that pull of the elbows up and out to maintain bar proximity and keep the bar moving as fast as possible. So again, work on them with contact most of the time. If you want to play around with a no contact thing, kind of see how it feels, see what you get out of it, obviously that is your choice. But I certainly wouldn't rely on that as the default.
Greg Everett with Catalyst Athletics here. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. If you have questions, post them in the comments. I answer all of them. Also check out catalystathletics.com for the biggest Olympic weightlifting exercise library out there, along with hundreds of free articles and videos and other resources for both athletes and coaches.